Why do you think they killed him? You think they killed him because he killed his people? Hell no. When he opened a $500 million hospital with 18 theaters for operation, I was there, and we went when he was making their own medicines. See, this was a man that gave free medical attention to all the citizens of Libya. And if Libya did not offer that kind of medical attention, they could fly anywhere in the world and get it, and the Libyan government would pay for it. Did you know that? No, you didn't.
What if I told you there was a time in Libya when university was free, hospital bills didn't exist, newlyweds received help buying homes, loans came without interest, farmers were given land and equipment, and fuel was cheaper than water? Under the 42-year rule of Muammar Gaddafi, the country operated under a system that supporters called revolutionary and critics called unsustainable, but either way, it was unlike anything else in modern Africa. For 42 years under Muammar Gaddafi, Libya experimented with a state-run model funded by oil, one that supporters call revolutionary and critics call deeply flawed. But here's what it actually looked like. 1. Free education.
Did you know education in Libya is free? From kindergarten through college? And did you know that if a Libyan wanted to come to America to be educated, the government in Libya paid for their education? Did you know that? I was there.
Under Muammar Gaddafi's rule, Libya utilized its vast oil wealth to establish a comprehensive social contract that prioritized entirely free and universal education from primary school through the doctoral level, successfully raising the national literacy rate from roughly 25% in 1969 to over 83% by 2011. This system was not only accessible, but highly subsidized. The state covered all tuition costs, provided grants for students to study at prestigious international universities if their specialty was unavailable at home, including living stipends often exceeding $2,000 USD per month, and actively promoted women's education to the point that female university enrollment eventually rivaled or surpassed that of males. However, this progress was intertwined with Gaddafi's political agenda. The curriculum was heavily influenced by his Green Book, which framed education as a tool for Jamahiriya, state of the masses, ideology rather than purely objective inquiry. While the policy provided a high standard of living and social mobility for millions, the infrastructure and quality of this centralized system have significantly fractured following the 2011 revolution and subsequent civil wars, leaving a legacy of both impressive social advancement and rigid state indoctrination. While critics argue that although education was free, curricula were closely tied to state ideology and political conformity was often expected, two very different interpretations of the same policy, yet one lasting reality. For millions of Libyans, access to education changed dramatically and continues to shape debates about how national wealth should be used to create opportunity. Between hope and control, opportunity and expectation, one reality endured. Millions experienced a life where learning was treated not as a privilege, but as a right, a change so profound that its impact still echoes in how Libyans think about education, opportunity, and the role of a nation's wealth in shaping human potential. 2. Free healthcare.
When he opened a $500 million hospital with 18 theaters for operation, I was there, and we went when he was making their own medicines. See, this was a man that gave free medical attention to all the citizens of Libya. And if Libya did not offer that kind of medical attention, they could fly anywhere in the world and get it, and the Libyan government would pay for it. Did you know that?
Under Muammar Gaddafi, Libya transformed its vast oil wealth into a monumental promise that healthcare was a fundamental human right, not a luxury reserved for the elite. From the moment a child was born, a family was met not with a bill, but with a state gift of approximately $5,000, ensuring every new life began with a foundation of security. This was a nation where the government didn't just build hospitals. It invested over $500 million into a massive healthcare expansion that brought advanced facilities, including regional clinics and surgical centers with 18 operating theaters, to even the most remote desert communities. The impact of this horizontal expansion was staggering. Life expectancy soared towards 73 years, while infant mortality rates plummeted from 27 to roughly 17.6 per 1,000 live births, helping Libya achieve 11 of the 12 global health for all indicators by the turn of the century. Beyond the brick and mortar, the state heavily subsidized medical education to produce generations of local doctors and nurses, while simultaneously recruiting foreign experts to fill critical gaps during periods of rapid growth. Perhaps the most emotional testament to this era's devotion was the treatment abroad program. If a citizen's condition was too complex for domestic facilities, the government fully funded their care internationally, providing a monthly allowance of over $2,300 for housing, travel, and even a car. While some critics point to institutionalized corruption and a lack of standardized clinical guidelines that hindered long-term efficiency, the reality for many was a system with zero foreign debt and symbolic prices for life's essentials. Following the 2011 revolution, many of these once grand facilities fell into ruin or were shuttered due to security threats, leaving the memory of a time when the state's primary mission was the total health and dignity of its people as a hauntingly powerful legacy for millions who now navigate a fractured medical landscape. For many Libyans who lived through that period, free healthcare remains one of the most tangible and frequently cited social benefits of the Gaddafi era, a policy that continues to shape public expectations about the state's responsibility in providing basic services long after his rule ended. Here is a quick reminder: if this breakdown of Libya under Muammar Gaddafi is giving you a new perspective, hit like and subscribe for more deep dives into untold African history. Now, let's continue. 3. Housing assistance.
Did you know that in Libya, nobody is homeless? Listen, everybody in Libya has either a home or an apartment. They call it a flat.
Under Muammar Gaddafi, Libya revolutionized the concept of shelter, transforming housing from a market luxury into a sacred human right for every citizen. This profound dedication was born from Gaddafi's own humble roots. Born into a Bedouin family of the rural poor, he never forgot that his own parents lived in a traditional goat hair tent, even as he rose to lead the nation. Driven by this personal history, he famously vowed that his parents would not receive a permanent house until every single Libyan had a home of their own, a promise he kept, as his father reportedly passed away while the family was still residing in a tent. This philosophy fueled a massive state-led effort to provide housing for all, where the government utilized its vast oil wealth to build entire new neighborhoods and modern apartment blocks across cities like Tripoli and Benghazi, ensuring that modern living standards were accessible to even the most vulnerable families. To empower the next generation and ensure that no young couple was left behind, the government implemented a life-changing system of direct support, where newlyweds received state grants of approximately $50,000 to help them purchase their first apartment and start their lives together without the weight of debt. Beyond these direct grants, the state-owned banks provided zero-interest loans for home construction. By treating shelter as a fundamental social right rather than a commodity, these policies achieved some of the highest homeownership rates in the region, creating a legacy of total residential security. While the landscape of Libya has changed significantly since 2011, the memory of an era where a roof over one's head was a guaranteed gift from the state remains a powerful and emotional symbol of a nation that once prioritized the dignity of its people above all else. 4. Interest-free loans. Imagine living in a country where your bank account never sees an interest charge, and the government pays you to get married. Under Muammar Gaddafi, Libya operated on a 0% interest law, where state-owned banks provided interest-free loans to all citizens, treating credit not as a profit machine, but as a fuel for growth. This wasn't just small change. Newlyweds were reportedly handed a one-time grant of roughly $50,000 to buy their first home, ensuring that housing was a human right rather than a lifelong debt trap. While Western banks were profiting from compound interest, Libya was using its massive oil reserves to bankroll everything from free electricity to 50% subsidies on every new car purchase. But there's a catch that most viral posts leave out. This financial utopia came with strings attached. This interest-free system was part of Gaddafi's Green Book ideology, which traded political freedom for economic security. While citizens enjoyed free healthcare and a literacy rate that skyrocketed from 25% to over 83%, they lived under a regime that banned political parties and strictly controlled every aspect of public life. Critics also point out that many interest-free services were actually structured as Islamic banking, where markups replaced traditional interest, and the entire system relied on an oil-dependent economy with no foreign debt, a model that collapsed almost instantly after the 2011 intervention. Was it a revolutionary blueprint for the world or a golden cage built on oil? 5. Agricultural support. During the decades of Muammar Gaddafi's leadership, agriculture became part of a broader ambition to make Libya less reliant on foreign food supplies and more economically independent. Muammar Gaddafi's agricultural support was a pillar of his Third International Theory, funded by oil wealth to achieve national self-sufficiency and Project Pan-African Leadership. Domestically, he launched the $25 billion Great Man-Made River, the world's largest irrigation project, which utilized a 2,800 kilometers network of pipes to pump fossil water from Saharan aquifers to northern coastal farms. To incentivize local production, the state provided aspiring Libyan farmers with free land, seeds, livestock, equipment, and a farmhouse, while heavily subsidizing water and essential foods like bread. Regionally, Gaddafi expanded this influence through the Libya-Africa portfolio, investing millions into large-scale projects such as the 100,000-hectare Libya Rice Initiative in Mali and rice production grants in Liberia. While these efforts significantly increased Libya's arable land and water access, they relied on non-renewable water sources, and many international projects collapsed following his death in 2011. 6. Fuel subsidies. Imagine a world where filling your car costs less than a small bag of chips. In Gaddafi's Libya, this wasn't a fantasy, it was a daily reality. For decades, the desert's liquid gold flowed through the pumps at a staggering $0.14 a liter, making petrol so cheap it was literally cheaper than a bottle of mineral water. While the rest of the globe scrambled over rising oil prices and economic crashes, Libyans pulled up to the station with a sense of total immunity. It was the ultimate symbol of a nation built on oil, a world where the engine of life never had to stop because the cost was practically zero. But this wasn't just about a cheap commute. It was a psychological shield. That 0.15 dinar price tag was a promise that the country's vast wealth belonged to the man on the street, creating a lifestyle where travel and movement were a fundamental right, not a luxury. Today, that era feels like a fever dream. When Libyans look back, they don't just miss the cheap fuel, they miss the staggering certainty of a life where the most vital resource on Earth cost almost nothing at all. It remains one of history's greatest what-ifs, a time when a tank of gas was the cheapest thing you could buy, and the desert's wealth felt bottomless. 7. Oil money went straight to the people. What if you wake up to a notification on your phone? A direct deposit, not from your boss, but from your country. In Libya, this wasn't just a dream. It was a promise that shook the world. For a moment in history, the idea was simple. The oil beneath the sand didn't belong to the politicians or the corporations. It belonged to the people. There was a plan to bypass the red tape and the corruption, depositing a share of every single barrel sold directly into the bank accounts of every citizen. It was a vision of a nation where being born on your soil meant you were a literal shareholder in its greatest treasure. But dreams that threaten the status quo rarely survive the people who guard it. While the world watched in disbelief, this plan to decentralize billions in wealth became a battleground between a visionary promise and a wall of political resistance. Today, that vision of oil for the people exists only as a ghost in the desert, a haunting reminder of a future that was nearly touched but never fully grasped. As we struggle with rising costs and shrinking pockets today, Libya's lost dividend forces us to ask the most dangerous question of all. If the wealth of the earth belongs to everyone, why is it that only a few ever get to hold the keys? 8. Under the regime of Muammar Gaddafi, electricity was provided as a fundamental state benefit, frequently described as heavily subsidized or entirely free for all citizens. This meant that for most of his 42-year rule, the majority of Libyan households did not receive electricity bills. This was the reality in Libya. Under Muammar Gaddafi, electricity was funded by the nation's massive oil reserves. The state-owned General Electricity Company of Libya operated on a model where the government absorbed almost all costs of generation and maintenance. This heavy subsidy meant that from the neon lights of Tripoli to remote desert villages, power stayed on for citizens at little to no personal cost. But how did a desert nation pull off a feat that even the wealthiest Western countries find impossible? The secret lay in Libya's unique economic structure. By nationalizing the oil industry, Gaddafi funneled billions directly into the national grid, prioritizing universal access over corporate profit. While this created an era of unprecedented energy stability and sparked massive industrial growth, it also meant the entire power infrastructure was tethered to a single political regime. When the 2011 revolution ended his rule, the free power era vanished, leaving behind a crumbling grid and a haunting question. Was the free electricity a gift of true sovereignty, or a temporary luxury that only oil gold could buy? Libya under Muammar Gaddafi wasn't just a chapter in history, it was an experiment that still divides the world today. Free education, free healthcare, housing grants, interest-free loans, ultra-cheap fuel, and oil wealth redirected to citizens. Was it a revolutionary model of national sovereignty, or a fragile system built on one resource and one ruler? The debate is far from over. So now I want to hear from you. Was this a blueprint the world ignored, or a system destined to collapse? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe for more deep dives into Africa's most controversial and misunderstood histories.
Well, I was with Muammar Gaddafi when Gaddafi in 1999 advanced coming out of the OAU to the African Union with a vision of the United States of Africa. Muammar Gaddafi spent, listen to me, billions of dollars to create the African Union. Did you know that Gaddafi gave $300 million and the other African nations gave $100 million to put up a satellite so that we who call Africa don't have to go through Europe to get to Africa? And Europe was getting $500 million a year just by our telephone calls to the continent. Now we can call directly to Africa, and that $500 million is in the hand of African people. Did you know that Muammar Gaddafi was setting up an African development bank with $70 billion in the African Development Bank from Libyan oil money? That we would not have to borrow money from the IMF and the World Bank at these exorbitant rates